Hello all my yarny friends, I'm Sara Sach. Welcome back to my crochet channel. Today's video I'm going to show you how to stitch up the spring bouquet wrap shawl. It's a really interesting style. It is more of what I would call a half circle, and it has a really nice drape and fit. It's more of what I would call a capelet. It wraps around your shoulders nicely and stays put, and it's just gorgeous. And I'll talk more about the yarn in just a second, but it is a medium weight number 4 acrylic yarn, and this shawl would look beautiful stitched up in just about any color of yarn. It's a really interesting design. It's all stitched up in triple stitches, so it stitches up really fast. And it's just absolutely gorgeous, as you saw in those pictures at the beginning of the video. It's an easy pattern to stitch up. It's a great take-along pattern if you're going to, say, a wedding or something, or somebody's birthday party, or a family member that you just want to make them something special. You could stitch this up along the way because it is stitched with triple stitches and stitches up really fast. It's a nice medium weight because it's nice when the weather, is a little bit chilly, but it's also nice when it starts to warm up just a bit and you want to just throw something on your shoulders. I just love how it turned out. And we did just a simple little trim along the edge, as you can see. It's not super fancy, but it also is pretty. The shawl itself measures about 26 inches by 52 inches across. And I used 3 skeins of yarn, but if you want to make it bigger, you certainly can. Or if you want to make it a little bit smaller, you certainly can. You can just keep doing the repeats until it's the length that you need. Okay, and we'll talk more about that as we go along in the video. Now you can find the complete pattern with pictures on my blog, and as always, I'll put that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. So to make our spring bouquet wrap shawl, of course you're going to need some yarn, and we used a medium weight number 4 acrylic yarn. And this is the yarn that we used, Premier Basix Mosaic. And the color is Bouquet. And that's why I thought I would name it the Spring Bouquet. Now, you're going to need 3 skeins, which would be about 12 ounces of a medium weight number 4 yarn. Now, of course, you can use any medium weight number 4 yarn to make this shawl. If you use 3, this is what I had left, was a small ball, and that will make you the shawl that's 26 by 52 inches, approximately, of course. But if you want to make it bigger, of course, you're going to need more. I think this would be beautiful in some of the Premier's ombre yarns. I think that would be absolutely gorgeous, or their gradient. Those are 2 that I just really love. And then of course I really loved this one when I purchased it. And I think it's perfect for this shawl. So we're going to stitch our shawl up with an eye hook, which is a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. And then of course after that, all you need is your scissors and a needle for weaving in ends. Now for today's demonstration, because this is a little bit of a busy yarn, I'm just going to use this that I have on hand. It's just like a soft rose color that I had in my yarn stash. It is also a medium weight number 4 acrylic yarn. But I'm going to do the demo and demonstration with this yarn. This style of shawl is worked from the top down. Okay. Now we're going to begin with our slip knot. We're going to chain 5 chains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to join this into a circle and make that stay knot. Now, again, as I always say, if you prefer to use a magic circle or magic ring here, it's totally fine. All right, so we're going to go in, pull up a loop, and chain 4. Now we're going to stitch a triple. And chain 2. 1, 2. Now we're going to stitch 2 triples. Got to have 2 wraps on your hook. There's 1 and 2 triples. And chain 2. And now we're going to do this 2 more times. 1, 2, and chain 2, and we'll do it one more time. 1 triple, 2 triples. This time we are not going to chain 2 afterwards, okay? So we have 2 triples, chain 2, 2 triples, chain 2, 2 triples, chain 2, and 2 triples. And now we're going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, and this is the way that row 1 should look. You'll have 4 sets of 2 triples and 3 chain 2 spaces. Now we're ready for row 2. All right, so we're not going to go this way. We're going to turn this way. Disregard that tail of yarn. We'll weave that in at the end. We're going to triple in the first triple stitch. And our chain 3 does count as 1 triple. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to triple in the next triple, which is this one. And that brings us to our first chain 2 space. In our chain 2 space, we're going to stitch 1 triple, chain 2, and 1 triple. All right. Now that brings us to our 2 triples. Get some more yarn out here. And we're going to stitch 1 triple in each of these 2. 1 and 2. All right, that brings us to our next chain 2 space, and we're going to stitch 1 triple, chain 2, and 1 triple. All right, that brings us to our next chain 2 space, and we're going to stitch a triple in those 2 triples. And by the way, some people call these trebles. Either way is correct. I just call them triples because they're not doubles. They're the next step up, triples. All right, so that brings us to our next chain 2 space. And we're going to stitch a triple, chain 2, get that knot out of the way. It looks like I have a little bit of a knot there, but since this is just a swatch, we're going to pretend like that knot's not there. Okay, so the knot's not there. All right, so we tripled, chain 2, and triple. Now we're going to stitch a triple in the next triple, and then in this last triple, we're going to stitch 2 triples. 1 and 2. All righty. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's take a look at what we did. Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 triples, or 4 sets of 4 triples. And then we still have 1, 2, 3 chain 2 spaces. And that is the way that row 2 should look. Let's do row 3. So we've chained 4. We're going to turn our work, and we're again going to stitch a triple in our first triple. So that gives us 2 right there at the beginning because our chain 4 counts as our first triple. Now we're going to stitch a triple in the next 2 stitches. 1 and 2. We're going to chain 2. We're going to skip the next triple and go in the chain 2 space, and we're going to stitch 2 triples in the chain 2 space. Chain 2 and 2 triples. And this is different than the row before. We only stitched 1 triple, but we're stitching 2 triples this time. All right, let's look so far what we've done on row 3, because row 3 is very important for setting up how we're going to do our repeats on our shawl. All right, so we chained 4 and then we tripled in the same stitch. Then we stitched 2 triples. We skipped the next triple, chain 2, and then in that chain 2 space, we stitched 2 triples, chain 2, and 2 triples. All right, now we're going to chain 2. We're going to skip this first triple, and that's the triple that was in that chain 2 space. And we're going to stitch 1 triple. Oops, better get my second wrap on there. In the next 2 stitches, 1, 2, and chain 2. So we'll skip this next triple, go right in the chain 2 space, and stitch 2 triples. 1, 2, chain 2, and 2 triples. I really want to take row 3 slowly because, like I said, this is very important for setting up our repeats for our shawl. All right, so we skipped 1, we did 1 in the next 2, skipped 1, chain 2, 2 triples, chain 2, 2 triples in that chain 2 space. And so we're going to do what we did here again. So we're going to skip the first one, triple in the next 2, more yarn out here, and chain 2. And see how that is the same. And so you can see what we did here and here, we did here and here. And so now we've chained 2. We're going to go in this third chain 2 space and stitch 2 triples. 1, 2, chain 2, and 2 triples in that chain 2 space. All right. Whoops. So here's our 2 triples, our chain 2, 2 triples. We're going to chain 2. We're going to skip this next triple and stitch a triple in the next 2. 1, don't mind that knot. This is just a swatch. All right, and that leaves us our last stitch, and on our last stitch we're going to stitch 2 triples. All right, and then we'll go ahead and chain 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, let's take a look at what we did for row 3. And I know I'm really concentrating on row 3, but this row is very important, and making sure everything lines up nicely and lays pretty, because this is where our repeats will come off. We basically set it up. Okay, so we started over here with our chain 4, and we stitched a triple in the same stitch as our chain 4, and then 2 triples. We skip this one, chain 2, and then in the chain 2 space here, we stitch 2 triples, chain 2, 2 triples, then chain 2. Skipped that stitch, 1 triple in the next 2, skip that stitch, and make sure you chain 2 before and after. And then that brings us to the center chain 2. 2 triples, chain 2, 2 triples, chain 2, skip that stitch, 1 triple in the next 2, skip that stitch, chain 2, and then we did that again. 2 triples, chain 2, 2 triples, chain 2, skip that stitch, and then 1 triple in the next 2, and then in the last stitch, 2 triples. And that is the way that row 3 should look. And like I said, this is one of the most important rows on our shawl to make sure that we have it correct. All right, so now we're ready for row 4. All right, so we've chained 4. We're going to stitch a triple in the same stitch or in that first stitch of our row. Okay, now we're going to stitch a triple in the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and we're going to stitch a triple in this chain 2 space, and that's going to give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 triples. We're going to chain 2, and we're going to skip these 2 triples and stitch in the chain 2 space and stitch 2 triples. 1, 2, chain 2, and 2 triples in this chain 2 space. And chain 2. Okay, pull that yarn out there a little bit because I want you to see how that looks. We have 6 triples. We stitched that last one in that chain 2 space. We chained 2 and we skipped these 2 triples, okay? So then we stitched our our 2 triples, chain 2 and 2 triples in that chain 2 space. All right, so we're going to skip these 2 triples and stitch a triple in the chain 2 space. Then we'll stitch a triple in the next 2. So we stitched a triple in those next 2 triples. Now we're going to stitch a triple in the chain 2 space and chain 2. We'll skip those 2 triples and go right to that chain 2 space and stitch 2 triples. 1, 2, chain 2, and 2 triples right in that same chain 2 space. All right, now we're going to chain 2. We'll skip these 2 triples and stitch a triple in the chain 2 space. Then again, like we did over here, we're going to stitch a triple in those 2 triples. We'll stitch a triple in the chain 2 space, chain 2. We'll skip those 2 triples and go right to that chain 2 space and stitch again 2 triples, chain 2, and 2 triples. There we go. We're going to chain 2, skip those 2 triples, triple in that chain 2 space, then we'll triple in the next 3. 1, 2, 3, And then in that last stitch, we're going to stitch 2 triples. There we go. And now we'll chain 4. All right, so let's take a look at our row 4. We started over here and we have 6 triples because again our chain 3 counts as our first. We skipped those 2 there. We did a chain 2 and then in the chain 2 space 2 triples, chain 2, 2 triples, chain 2, and we skipped those 2 right there, and then we have 4, chain 2, then we have our 2, chain 2, and 2 triples, chain 2, 4 here, 2 triples, chain 2, 2 triples, chain 2, and then we end with 6. This is how row 4 should look. So now you have completed the 4th row. And once you've gotten this far, you've finished the hardest part because you're all set up for all your repeats, okay? Because if you look at this, you'll see that we have these 3 sections here where we have our 2 triples, our chain 2 with chain 2s before and after. The only thing that will change after that is the amount of stitches here and in between. All right, so we've chained 4. We're going to turn our work and stitch a triple in that first stitch. Now we're going to stitch a triple in each of these. And because we're increasing by 1 on the ends, it will increase every row. All right. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're going to stitch 1 in the chain 2 space, so that gives us 8. Where on the previous row, we only had 6. All right, we're going to chain 2, and we're going to go to that chain 2 space, skip over those 2 there, and go right to that chain 2 space, and stitch our 2 triples, chain 2, and 2 triples. And chain 2. All right, so we'll skip these 2 and we'll go right to this chain 2 space and stitch a triple. Then we'll stitch a triple in those 4 stitches. And then we'll stitch a triple in the chain 2 space. Whoops. We'll try that again. There we go. Jumped right off my hook, didn't it? All right, chain 2. So let's look at it. Where on this row we only had 1, 2, 3, 4. On this row we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're increasing there as well. We'll skip those 2 and go right to that chain 2 space and stitch our 2 triples, chain 2, and 2 triples. There we go. And chain 2. And so what you're seeing is these sections where we chain 2, 2 triples, chain 2, and 2 triples are all going to be the same throughout our shawl. What changes are the section in between where we increase. All right, so we'll go to this chain 2 space and stitch a triple, 1 triple in each of these 4, and then a triple in the chain 2 space and chain 2. All right, so this section here and this section here will always have the same amount of increases. All right, let's go to our next chain 2 space and stitch our 2 triples. 1, 2, chain 2, and 2 triples. All right, and that brings us to the end, and so we're going to stitch a triple in the chain 2 space, and then 1 in each across and 2 in the last. All right, I stitched my 2 in the last, and we're going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, and so you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just like you do on this side. And so these two, this one and this one, will increase the same. And then these two, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these two will increase the same. And then our 3 corners per se, okay? And so once you get this far, I think you're going to find that this is a super easy pattern to stitch up. So you've got 8 and 8, 6 and 6, and then our 3 corners or points. And I'm doing quotes because they're not really corners, they're kind of rounded. Let's do row 6. We've chained 4. We're going to turn our work. We're going to triple in that first stitch. There we go. Now we're going to triple in each of these stitches. And this is where you'll see increases, as I said earlier. This is how the shawl increases, because we increase at the beginning and end of this section. And of course, we're increasing on all of the in-between sections. All right. And now we're going to triple in the chain 2 space and chain 2. But before we go on, let's take a look at it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So on this section and the end section, we're increasing at the beginning here and in the chain 2 space. So 2 stitches here and here will be increased. All right, so now we're going to go to our chain 2 space and stitch our 2 triples, 1 and 2, chain 2 and 2 triples in that chain 2 space. And like I said, there's no increasing in this particular portion. It is the same. We're stitching that 2 triple, chain 2, 2 triple in the chain 2 spaces, and then chain 2. All right, so now we'll go ahead and triple in this chain 2 space. 1 triple in each of those. Alrighty. 1 more. And then we'll triple in the chain 2 space. Alright, so let's take a look at this real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Where here we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're increasing here and here. All right. Chain 2, and we skip over these and go right to this chain 2 space. Whoops, got to put 2 wraps for a triple. There we go. I think muscle memory thinks I want to do double crochets, huh? 2 triples, chain 2, and 2 triples. And chain 2. And again, the point or the corner is the same. 2 triples, chain 2, 2 triples, and then chain 2. So that brings us to this section. And so we're going to stitch a triple in that chain 2 space, and then 1 in each of those there's 6 of them there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, and then we're going to stitch a triple in that chain 2 space. So now where we had 6 on this row here, on row 6 we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just like we did on this side. Okay, and then chain 2, we come to the chain 2 here, we skip those 2 there, and stitch our 2 triples. 1, 2, chain 2, and 2 triples. And chain 2. All right, so now we're on our last section, and we're going to stitch a triple in the chain 2 space, and then 1 in each across and 2 in the last one. And you're also going to find that because we are working triple stitches, that this shawl does work up pretty fast. I was going to say pretty fast, and it didn't come out quite right. Alrighty, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then in our last one, we're going to stitch 2, which will give us 10 triple stitches. There we go. And chain 4. All right, so we have 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have our little corner here with 2, chain 2, 2, and then we have 8, 2 triples, chain 2, 2 triples, then we have 8. So these 2 are the same, and then we have 10. So these 2 are the same. All right, and they should always be the same. These 2 should always be the same, and these 2 should always be the same with the amount of increases. And then, of course, our sections here, our little, what I call corners or points, they are always the same. And so if you're making your shawl the size that I made mine, you're going to need to increase for 19 more rows. And my shawl measures approximately 26 by 52. And that, of course, includes the little trim that we're going to add. All right, so you'll continue to increase at the beginning and end of these sections every row for 19 more rows. Again, increasing every row. Because once you've done row 6, you've laid the groundwork for how the rest of the shawl is made. The most important thing is to make sure that your 2 sections here increase exactly the same, and your 2 sections here increase exactly the same. All right, so just to repeat one more time, you're going to continue to repeat row 6 increasing every row for 19 more rows, or more if you want a larger shawl. And so again, this is my actual shawl, and you can see how it increased here, here, and here. But our little corner or points, they're not really pointed, you can see they end up round, are done exactly the same, that give us that beautiful look, like there's a braid going down the center in 3 different spots. And here you can see how it just increased out. Okay? And that's what you're going to do for those 19 additional rows. Again, or more if you want to make your wrap shawl even longer. All right, so now I want to show you how we're going to finish the top as well as add the trim on the bottom. So now I'm back to my swatch that we're using to learn our stitches. Once you've made your shawl as long as you want it, we'll take this chain 4 out here. What we're going to do is we're going to start by evenly single crocheting across the top of our shawl. And so you'll chain 1, and then you'll go in the sides of those stitches and evenly single crochet across the top. And that will give us a nice finished edge. And the key for it to look really nice is not to go in the holes in between, but to try to go in the sides of the stitches themselves. All right, just go in the stitch on the side and stitch single crochets all the way across. Now, there may be a spot where you feel like you need to put it in the hole, and that's okay, but for the most part you really want to stitch in the side of the stitch. And let me show you how neat that looks going across there, because we're stitching in the sides of the stitches. And if you stitch in these big gaping holes, and you're going to have holes because we're using triple stitches, but that will pull that out even more and not make it look nice and neat. And you want to just go all the way across the top of your shawl. And then we'll come down the outside and do the trim. All right, so there is not a set amount of stitches that you need to have. And of course, if you added more or subtracted rows, you're going to have more or less stitches. And that's okay. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have a set amount of stitches. You just need to make a nice even row of single crochets going across. And you need to really look at it and make sure it's not bunching up or it's not too far apart and pulling. Okay, for it to be nice and neat. And I also took a minute and went ahead and weaved this end in, because I want it to be nice and neat for you to see. All right, where we had that end, just take your needle and weave it in around this circle and tie that off so that it's nice and neat. All right, so we're just going to evenly single crochet all the way across our shawl. So I have evenly single crocheted all the way across my swatch of my shawl. Of course, yours is going to be bigger because you're making a whole shawl. All right, when you get to the end, you need to chain 1 and turn. And now we're going to make that trim, and it's a really, really simple trim. You just single crochet in the first stitch. We're going to chain 3. Skip the next stitch and single crochet in the next. Chain 3, skip the next, single crochet in the next. Chain 3, skip the next, and single crochet in the next. So it's just a really, really simple trim. I wanted to keep it really simple on this one, because I think the body of the shawl is really the star. And just adding a simple trim makes it look really pretty. All right, so that's how you do that with the stitches. Well, when you have these holes, you just do them the same as the stitches. Chain 3, skip the next, and single crochet in the next. Just like that. Chain 3. That brings us to a stitch. Just like that. Whether it's a chain or a chain 1 or a triple, you just treat it exactly the same. Stitching single crochet, chain 3, skip 1, single crochet, chain 3, skip 1, all the way around the bottom of your shawl. And you can see already how it just adds just a little bit extra to make it pretty. And so here is that bottom edge of my shawl. I single crocheted across the top, and then I turned down the edge and worked all the way around the bottom. Put this on white so you can see it. Around the edge of my shawl. And I just absolutely love how it looks. Now, if you want something a little more fancy, you certainly can do that. I just didn't want something super fancy on the bottom. I just wanted it to look pretty. And then when you get back up to the other side, you just join to that single crochet and tie off and weave it in. And then the shawl is complete. I love this style because of the way it lays across your shoulders, the way that it's kind of like a capelet, because it does kind of hug around your shoulders. And I love that. This yarn is also just gorgeous with all these colors. And it works up relatively fast because it is stitched with all triple stitches. And of course, I love these sections that look like almost like a cable or a braid going up to the top. It's a simple design with an elegant look.